Hello and welcome to a slightly different video today. I figured since we're halfway through the third decade and it's been 8 or 9 months since I've started the challenge, we might be due for a family tree overview as a refresher of who everyone is and how they ended up where they are. So this is for those of you who have been following along since the very beginning, but it's also for those of you who might be new to my series and haven't watched the earlier episodes. This should help you get a feel for who everyone is. The family tree is linked in the video description if you'd like to take a look. We are going to start off at the very top of the family tree. In the middle here, we have our Gen 1 founder, Frederik, but I also created his Gen 0 parents, Wendell and Alyson Barrow. And he has two sisters who were our initial side households. On the left here, we have his sister Cecelia, and on the right, we have his younger sister Gemma. You'll notice we have another even younger sister on the right here. This is Gabriella, and she was born from Wendell's second marriage. If we come back up here to Wendell, his first wife, Alyson here, passed away in the very first episode from her adult role. And a few years later, he had a midlife crisis, and in the span of a single sim day, he met his soulmate Shanna here. They woohooed, she got pregnant, and so they got married. Their first child, Amy, passed away under suspicious circumstances right after Shanna made a wish to the wishing well and got 21,000 simoleons. So there were some rumors of witchcraft going on, but all of that ended when she, like her predecessor Alyson, died from her adult birthday role not long after having given birth to baby Gabriella. Wendell here was a really hardworking sim. He really loved the land and wanted the family farm to succeed so that his son Frederik and his grandchildren would be secure and able to carry on his legacy. He passed away basically from exhaustion when his time was up for his dice rolls, and he left the farm to his son Frederik, our main sim for Gen 1. Before we talk about Frederik, though, we are going to go over to our side households first and leave the main line for last. So over here, we have Cecelia Baker. She very much married for love and happened to marry a man who was much better off than her family of farmers. Together, they managed a local bakery and had a whopping 10 children, but as you can see, only 4 of them made it to being teens. The family was a major victim of the famine. They really struggled to keep the bakery running, and they had to rely on support from Cecilia's brother, Frederik. In the end, both of the parents passed away during the famine and left behind 5 orphans. One of them failed their teen role, which leaves us with these 4. The eldest son, Vasco, is currently training to be a baker under the supervision of his guardian, Sigurd Branson, who was an old friend of his father's. He intends to buy back his father's bakery to continue in his parents' footsteps. We didn't actually see this in any of the episodes, but Vasco recently married his guardian's daughter, Mariana. He has 10 baby tries, but since we aren't really following the bakers that much, I don't intend to use all of them. I might just use a few to make sure that he has at least 1 or 2 kids that survive into the future. Earlier in the series, I did transfer some baby tries from one side household to another. I used some of Gemma's baby tries for Shanna's pregnancies, so I don't know how you guys would feel if I did that again in some cases. Like, for example, if I transferred a few of Vasco's pregnancy tries to sims that were following more closely, but who only rolled 2 or 3 baby tries, like Adrianna, Cailan, or Auguste, because at the end of the day, it would still mean the same amount of baby tries, just slightly better balance between the side households. And I think it would also be more fun to give them to sims that we're more invested in, rather than having family lines with tons of kids that we never really see. Let me know what you guys think, if you think it might be too cheaty, or if you agree it might make for better storyline potential. So anyway, moving on, the second Baker orphan that we have here is Zane. After being orphaned, Zane was sent to the local keep to work as a servant, but now that he's older, he has begun training to join the guards. He isn't married yet. He did roll to get married and have 5 pregnancy chances, but for now, just keep this guy in mind because he is going to be important when we start talking about another family branch. The last 2 Baker orphans, Lucia and Endrio, were sent to work at an inn when they were orphaned, but they ran away and boarded a ship where they hid for several months until they were discovered. They ended up escaping the ship while it was docked in Tartosa, and they were then forced to beg and steal in order to survive. They were taken in by the very kind Madame Rochefort. Now, the Madame actually runs I'll say almost high-end brothel where the siblings have been working as servants. However, Lucia aged up with a hedonistic trait, and so it seems very likely that she will want to start working as one of the Madame's roses, shall we call them, when she reaches the age of 18. Lucia rolled not to marry, but to have 5 baby tries, which is why I sent her to a brothel. And Endrio rolled to marry and also have 10 baby tries like his brother, so he's another side household that we could potentially borrow baby tries from. He's currently only 15 years old, so I haven't started looking for a wife for him just yet, but being a creepy, cheerful kleptomaniac, I am very much looking forward to discovering what kind of sim he will click with and then have tons of babies with. So that's it for the Baker line. I am now going to skip over our main line to head on over to Gemma over here. Gemma was initially married to Stuart Hale, with whom she did not get along very well. You'll notice that he is not part of the family tree. That is because they don't have any surviving children. She was very young when she got married and was not at all interested in marriage and children, but Wendell wanted her to be settled down and secure, so he matched her with the very reliable Stuart Hale. After losing all 3 of her children to their birthday rolls, Gemma faked her own death with the help of the local witch, which is to say I misread her roll and accidentally killed her in childbirth. Once I realized my mistake, I brought her back to life, and she revealed that she had actually escaped to the nearby town of Henford, where she had made a new life for herself under a fake name. With the help of her good friend, the rich merchant Staunton de Lacy, she executed a plan to seduce and marry a retired knight who has an estate and some land of his own. This knight was Amos Verviers, who, as it turns out, already had 2 adult sons who were feuding over who would inherit their father's land and money. Gemma ended up having an affair with both sons. One of them was the good and proper Tobias, and the other one was the evil Lucan, who also happened to be her soulmate. In an unexpected turn of events, Gemma passed away from a sudden illness, leaving behind 2 sons of dubious parentage. During the famine, Sir Amos started making plans to send the kids to be raised by Tobias, but Sir Lucan, who secretly believed that the children were his, ended up hiring a thug to assassinate Sir Amos, after which he also murdered a witch in order to complete a ritual to bring Gemma back to life. There was a lot of drama happening during the famine. So Gemma came back to life and finally married her soulmate, Sir Lucan, but the witch who was sacrificed happened to have a daughter who witnessed the events and cursed Gemma and Lucan's descendants. Barely a year after being revived, Gemma then died giving birth to her son, Ghyslain. As you can see, she currently has only 2 sons left. All the others failed one birthday roll or another. In fact, Auguste here failed his teen roll, but was saved by Ghyslain, who successfully pleaded with the Grim Reaper. As it turns out, all of Gemma's kids who were born during her marriage with Sir Amos ended up actually being Amos's, which is pretty surprising. So Auguste here is Amos's son, and Ghyslain here is the only one who was born after Amos passed away and is Lucan's son. The older of the 2 brothers here, Auguste, is heroic and striving to follow in his father's footsteps. His father Amos was a very respected and loyal knight, and Lucan has been helping him train since he was very young. He also happens to be detached, which is probably a result of having seen so much death at such a young age. He remembers the famine very vividly. His father was murdered, all of his brothers except Ghyslain passed away, and then his mother died twice. So the kid's sort of dealing with a lot of baggage. He did roll to get married, so he is going to be in the market for a wife very soon, but he rolled to have just 2 baby tries, which might make sense for him if he's struggling with a bit of fear of people he loves passing away. The younger brother, Ghyslain here, is a loner and a fairy tale fanatic, so he's been brought up with stories about knights and princesses and might be a little bit out of touch with things. He also saw quite a bit of death in his lifetime, so he's probably prone to a bit of escapism, But at the same time, he also has a running streak of 2 successful pleads to the Grim Reaper. He saved both Auguste and his father Lucan when they failed their birthday rolls. So fairy tales do seem to be coming true in his life. And that's without mentioning that he was cursed by a witch when he was a baby, and we are currently waiting to see what the effect of that will be. I have not forgotten about it. There really is an in-game curse that's going to come into play when he becomes a teen. The last of the Gen 1 siblings that we have is Gabriella. Gabriella here was just a toddler when her father Wendell passed away, so she was actually raised by her half-brother Frederik alongside his children. So even though she's technically our current Sims aunt, she feels more like a sister to our current generation Sims. While her father was alive, she spent most of her time outside with him, watching him tend to the farm and care for the land. So she grew up loving nature as well, and I guess she's a bit of a hippie Disney princess. She fell in love at first sight with Corey here, who also happened to have been orphaned at a young age, but he didn't have any family members to take care of him, so he actually lived as a pickpocket for most of his younger years and lived with a group of outlaws in the woods. They were very passionate from the very first moment they met, and Gabriella became pregnant very quickly, so he has left his life of crime behind him, and the two of them got married and moved into an old wooden shack the outlaws used to use as a hideout. They now have one daughter, named Shanna after Gabriella's mother, and they still have 8 pregnancy tries to go. Moving back to our main line. We have Frederik Barrow, who was our Gen 1 Sim. He was a loner who preferred woodworking to working on the farm, so he was very happy to let his father manage their lot for most of his life. He was matched with Rosemary, who ended up being a great partner for him, and they did end up falling in love and becoming soulmates. She was his outdoorsy, cheerful opposite, but they ended up completing each other really well, and together they had 11 children, out of which 9 are still alive. Frederik passed away at the very end of the famine after contracting an illness from his sister Cecelia, who he had been supporting during the famine. And so that's how the farm was passed on to our second generation. Rosemary is still alive. She's one of the only Sims left from Gen 1, and she has just recently been remarried with one of the guards and has given birth to what will hopefully be her last child. So she has had a total of 12 children by now. The oldest of our Gen 2 siblings is Stefanie. She was wonderful in her role of being the big sister to 8 siblings. After her father died, she promised to stick around to keep helping her mother with all of the children, but she did struggle a bit, and then when all of her siblings were old enough, she quickly accepted an offer of marriage from her childhood friend, Brandon, who also lost his father in the famine and inherited the local smithy. It's not exactly a love match, but they are best friends and they get along really well. They would be perfectly happy if it wasn't for Brandon's mother, Sheila, living with them. Sheila happens to hate children, but also had a child out of wedlock with one of the local outlaws. Stefanie has been the one caring for the child and has been trying to pass her off as the twin of her oldest daughter, Nicolette, but she already has 2 children of her own to manage with no help from her mother-in-law, and so it has definitely been a source of tension. Stefanie currently has 2 young daughters, Nicolette and Tara, and still has 2 pregnancies left. Sheila's daughter, Cara, isn't part of our tree since she's not blood related, but she is living with them for now. The next Gen 2 Sim that we have here is Brayden. Brayden is currently our main Sim. He inherited the farm after his father's passing and very much took after his grandfather. He has great ambitions for his family and wants them to be so successful that he actually roped his best friend into giving some very expensive gifts to the Lord so that Brayden would be granted more land. Brayden is currently sinking very deeply into debt. He owes thousands of simoleons to his siblings as part of their inheritance, and he also owes 36,000 simoleons to his best friend, Quentin de Lacy, who is the one who buttered up the Lord for him. Brayden is married to Quentin's illegitimate half-sister Fatima, who had a crush on him as they were growing up. Their marriage hasn't been all that successful. Fatima has a tendency to flirt with other men, including Brayden's brother, and they've also been struggling to conceive and so far have lost 3 babies to birth rolls. They currently only have 1 son, Romarin, and further complicating things is that Fatima met her soulmate, and it is not Brayden. It is, in fact, his cousin, Zane Baker, the orphan who was sent as a servant to the local keep. Now that Fatima has recently lost another baby, she has decided that she no longer wants to actively try to have children, which has Brayden feeling quite sad, and so the future for these two is a bit uncertain at the moment. Brayden has a twin brother, Frederik, with whom he has had a rivalry for the longest time because Frederik is a lot more interested in working the land rather than just being in charge of it. And so he's always sort of resented Brayden for being the firstborn and not really being worthy of inheriting their father and their grandfather's farm. Another thing that made things difficult between the brothers is that before being married, Brayden had a crush on a girl named Eleonora, who instead was interested in Frederik. Eleonora and Frederik had an autonomous woohoo. She ended up getting pregnant, but since Frederik had rolled not to have children, I could not have him marry her, and so Frederik turned her away, and Brayden had to pay a fine to their lord because of it. Brayden later arranged for Frederik to meet and get engaged to a widow who had inherited land from her husband, and so Frederik is now married and content and is raising her 3 children as his own. You'll notice his illegitimate daughter is not on our family tree. That is because she can never inherit anything, and so I am currently treating her as just another townie since he did not roll to have any kids, and her birth was a bit of an accident that was caused by the autonomy going wild. The next Gen 2 sibling is Noah. Noah was initially a little charmer who really loved his grandfather Wendell, and when Wendell passed away, Noah ended up becoming a bit of a difficult child and grew up to have the bad-natured and slob traits. He became quite the little troublemaker, and there were several episodes during which I expressed my great dislike of him, up until he rolled to die in the famine. During the famine, he went out to go poaching with his brothers Brayden and Cailan and their rich friend Quentin de Lacy, and in doing so, both Noah and Quentin were mortally wounded. Fortunately, both of them were successfully pleaded for, and Noah's attitude did slightly improve from that point on, even if he later aged up to also be nosy. When his cousins, the Baker Orphans, Lucia and Enrio, disappeared, he was sent to the tavern to take their place as a servant, alongside his best friend forever, Gabriella, which, if you think about it, is the perfect environment for a bad-natured, nosy guy like Noah. While working there, he befriended the lovely Daisy, who is cheerful and well-balanced and has been, I'll say, an anchor for Noah, whose attitude has greatly improved since the two of them got married, although that did not stop him from having a quick little fling with the tavern owner's lonely wife, Cataline. Thankfully, that did not result in any unwanted children, and Noah and Daisy now have 2 children of their own, Hannah and Christopher, and are now expecting again. Next in the line is Cailan. Cailan has been, from the moment he became a toddler, my favorite among all of the Barrow children. As a toddler, he was a charming little chap who later aged up to become cold-blooded. So Cailan is fearless and calculating, and he is currently the caretaker of our original farm, while Brayden is staying on the new land that he was granted by the Lord. Cailan previously flirted with Brayden's wife Fatima and had a woohoo with Stefanie's mother-in-law Sheila, so you might say he's starting to perhaps get a taste for the ladies. He also had a brief fling with a farmhand on Brayden's farm and has an unexplained romance bar with his younger sister's boyfriend. Cailan recently met Quentin's sister Rosa and has started a bit of a romantic attachment with her, but he also knows that he could never marry her since she is a rich merchant's daughter and he is only a farmer. So he's really just looking to have fun at the moment. And being cold-blooded, I think he might also be a little callous, so if there are consequences to what he does, he may find ways to avoid them with no regard for the women whose lives he may be ruining. He is the next sibling that we're going to try and find a spouse for, but he only has 3 baby tries, so he's not exactly in a rush to settle down at the moment. Right, and I was also forgetting that another person that he has a romance bar with is Eleonora, the mother of his brother Frederik's illegitimate child. The next sibling is Adrianna. Adrianna was a tomboy growing up. She had 4 brothers and very much enjoyed playing outside with them and their friends. She has a pretty explosive set of traits. She's moody, she's impulsive, and she's whimsical, in addition to being an animal enthusiast. So basically, she wants to do whatever she wants, when she wants, and doesn't care a fig about what other people think or say about her. She might even feel more attached to animals than she does to people. However, she also grew up to be an absolute beauty, and she is still in the process of navigating that. She is currently dating a slightly older man named Grayson Carver, but Grayson is family-oriented and seems to want a more traditional marriage and lifestyle, while Adrianna only rolled to have 2 pregnancies, and like I said, I think she's more interested in working with animals than raising a farm, so their relationship has sort of been hot and cold. The other thing is that Adrianna does seem to have a thing for older men in general, because recently at Quentin's wedding, she had a fling with no other than the evil and handsome Sir Lucan, who, through his marriage with Gemma, is kind of her uncle, but she doesn't actually know that. And then she also had a fling at Noah's Tavern with the leader of the outlaws, Harlan Graves, while brushing off Grayson, who had come to the tavern to spend time with her. So as you can see, she's sort of been playing with fire, and we don't currently know if she might be pregnant from her latest adventure. After Adrianna, we have the warm-hearted and very proper Esther, who is basically the opposite of her sister. She happens to be both insecure and judgmental, so I see this as her being the type to bring other people down to make herself feel better. She had a difficult relationship with her sister Adrianna from the very beginning, so I think that contributes to making her feel like she's never really good enough. She's never been as active as her sister, never as tough as her sister, and now she feels like she's not as pretty as her sister either. But now that she's living with Brayden and Fatima, she's sort of cultivated a sisterly relationship with Fatima instead. And through taking care of little Romarin, I think she started looking forward to getting out of her sister's shadow and finding herself a partner to start a family of her own. The only issue is that she actually rolled not to get married, and she only has 2 pregnancies. So it looks like her dreams won't quite come true, but how this plays out is still to be seen. Next in line is Alexander. Alexander is sort of a strange little guy. He's a judgmental sleuth who also happens to be a home chef. We haven't seen much of him yet since he's been living on our old farm with Rosemary and Cailan, but he's just 1 year away from becoming a teen. So once our older teens are married and have settled down, we're going to be spending a bit more time with him to figure out who he is and what might be in the cards for him. It is worth mentioning, though, that he has by far the best haircut in all of SimWorld. The last of our Gen 2 siblings is little Alyson. She is a perky and outgoing animal whisperer, so she's quite different from both Esther and Adrianna. She's a lot more positive and friendly. So that is it for our family tree overview. Congrats if you've made it this far. I'm sorry if I've been a little long-winded, but I hope that it's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode where we will be playing out the second half of 1325.